Okay. You know, you look disappointed. Because people will see I say the same stupid jokes over and over again, and then I can't use them again. I just don't want to really be online. Is that okay?
All right.
Okay.
Hey,
With all respect.
your wish is our command, Mr. Payne. All right. Well, let's start this discussion anyway with us, and then they'll have their time, obviously.
Okay.
Well, downsizing is obviously a passion project of yours. I mean, brewing for more than 10 years. So I want to know what triggered such an intriguing solution to overpopulation, climate change, and why do you think the films take so long in your mind?
First of all, let me talk about passion projects.
Yes.
I'm tired of passion projects. Yeah, I don't, it took 11 years to make this film from conception to execution. And it doesn't necessarily mean, and I thought about it so much, it took so many years and so much effort, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the resulting film is better than a film that maybe I spent 1 year on and made it quickly like this. Film is funny that way, you just can't tell. Similarly, first of all, how many film students here? Anyone studying film or directing? Are you a directing student? Just to get us, you are. Is it from the films?
La féministe, bien sûr.
Yeah, okay. And who else is here? Who else?
We have
We have some
members.
some bloggers. Okay, good. Yeah, sorry. I just didn't want to do it. And who else is in the audience? Just so I know whom we're talking to.
Feminists, directors, some AMPUS members, some bloggers.
Actors, bloggers.
Voilà.
Okay, fine. All right, okay.
All right. So what triggered this idea really, and why did it take so long?
My co-writer Jim Taylor has a crazy brother named Doug, and Doug Taylor was saying, you guys really should make a movie about, well, if you were only this small, you could have a big house on a big estate with only 2 square meters, and you wouldn't have to spend much money with food. And maybe there would develop a conflict between big and small. Alexander, what do you think? I didn't know what to do. It felt a little bit silly to me. And then in 2006, I was on an airplane, and suddenly I thought about their idea. And I thought, okay, well, how really, really, really would that happen? How could it be grounded in reality? And I thought, probably Scandinavian scientists would dream of that as a panacea to overpopulation, and that's where the idea came from.
Did you, with Jim Taylor, obviously, actually work with scientific consultants, or did you decide in a way to be your own scientist in a film lab?
Both. Mostly the latter. Mostly we just invented it and guessed. But, we talked a little bit with a biologist about what the physics of existence would be like if you were really that small. And then later, when I came to directing the film, and I was working with a visual effects supervisor, I had to talk a little bit more about the physics, as I say, the physics of what it would be. But we didn't concern ourselves too much.
About the reality of it all.
Who cares about reality?
Yeah, who does? Well, the tone of the movie is very much really your own and Jim's, really. It's a mixture of gravitas and of fun and humor. How, during the writing process, how delicate a balance was it to keep that mix of tones that is really part of your DNA as a filmmaker?
Le style, c'est moi.
Bien sûr.
I asked that question a lot. How do you balance comedy and pathos? How do you balance humor and drama? And there's no how. I can't describe it. It's just what comes. There's no how.
But when you were working, let's say, literally the writing process, how would you sort of bounce off each other and saying, well, we go this direction or that direction?
First of all, it was a very, very long writing process. This screenplay for this film is why 6 years passed between Sideways and The Descendants. It wasn't for any other reason other than I wanted this movie to be my first film after Sideways, but the screenplay took so fucking long. And then it was hard to get financing, almost impossible to get financing. You can ask me other questions about screenwriting, but to say, how did you bring, we work, and those of you who, film students, work is instinctive. It's not, well, let's figure out how we, and I guess in hindsight, I could tell you, well, we do this or that, but I really can't. It's just what comes. The only thing I can say, and it's not a complete answer to your question, is the humor for us comes from taking an absurd premise, and the premise is completely absurd, and treating it utterly seriously. And the more seriously we treat the premise, both in the writing and then later in the directing, the funnier it is. But it's not necessarily a humor that you laugh out loud. It's an intellectual humor.
In fact, I mean, Downsizing, as Paul, your character, puts it, is pretty wild, to quote his words. I mean, what were really the artistic and technical challenges, as you were mentioning, special effects, etc., that you faced in particular? Because I believe it's the first time you're really playing with special effects to that extent, and it's brilliant.
No, thank you for the brilliant.
Honestly,
It's the first time I've made a visual effects film. We called it a visual effects. It is indeed the first time I've made a visual effects film. What I learned about it was that it's not that it's so difficult, it's simply very time consuming. And as a director, you need to hire a very good visual effects czar, a visual effects specialist, supervisor. I told him, help me understand the process little by little, and also as much as possible trick me into thinking I'm making a real movie. That is to say, a movie without visual effects, because the number one thing that suffers typically in visual effects film is the acting and the story, and that could not happen on my film. So a lot of the visual effects process, which was extensive, there are 750 visual effects shots in the film. A lot of it was designed around my concern to make sure that the actors were protected. And I also wanted the visual effects to be so good as to be so believable so as to be banal. I wanted the movie to look like it was made in about 1978. And the visual effects, the other thing about the visual effects is, unlike many action visual effects films where the shots are on for a very short time, this one the shots are on for a long time, and the audience then has the opportunity to detect imperfections. So that was an extra challenge.
I must say, I don't know about you, but one of the images that struck me most in the film is obviously the sort of downsizing chamber. I mean, did you give any specific instructions to your set designer to make it the way you wanted it?
It should look like a big microwave oven.
That's your idea of a microwave oven. Very surprising, Mr. Payne.
No, there was that, and where they're shaved and where they receive the colonic, we built that. I mean, that was a sequence, it's my favorite sequence in the film, thank you for asking about it. But it's not a visual effects sequence, it's a production designer sequence. It was mostly built. Later, when everyone is having their teeth removed, their fillings removed, we shot that at a dental school. So that's a real place. That's a dental school in Toronto, Canada.
I mean, when Downsizing launched the Venice Film Festival, I mean, I read in the press some people called it a science fiction comedy, others a political satire, some others social parable. What would you call it? And truly wanted to explore?
A movie.
Yeah.
That's the pretentious director. I don't make comedies, I don't make dramas, it's just a movie. But it's really true. It's not for me to label.
I agree. But
If you ask me, for me, all my movies, including The Descendants, which is kind of depressing, and About Schmidt, which is kind of, to me, they're all comedies. I'm looking for the humor, I'm looking for the absurd. Other people say, yeah, you say it's a comedy, but it's not so funny. It's a little bit, it's more like a funny drama. Like, okay, fine. I don't care. For me, I'm trying to direct everything I do. I like films which are charming, and I like films which are funny. I mean, many times I see contemporary movies, and someone will say, well, what did you think of that movie? And I'll say, well, it was good, but no jokes. I really don't like movies that have no humor in them.
well, your films certainly have humor in them. I mean, what did you, specifically through the prism of downsizing, did you want to explore personally?
What else do you have there?
I won't tell you. That's the game.
You know, explore. Do I have to take that word literally?
No, you can take any word you want and you want.
It's not about exploring. I had after Sideways, I had the urge to make something both more ambitious than I had made before, and with some political consciousness, as had existed in my first two feature films, Citizen Ruth and Election, La Revise Enfant. And so there was that.
Would you call it, because that's personally how I sort of thought about it, a love story?
It evolves into a love story. The last hour is a very improbable love story. Perhaps its roots begin at the beginning because you see him in the two long relationships, one with his wife, another, not a relationship, but with a woman he's dating.
A budding dating.
Yeah, you know, the stupid dates you go on after you've been divorced. And then finally, the third time, you know, he finds the right one, not looking for her. So that was a love story that surprised us even as we were writing the script. We didn't think, let's make a love story, but it just came out. And it was my first time really. Sideways had a bit of a love story, but this was my first time doing a real love story, and it felt very nice.
Yeah, that's how I perceived it. I actually said it's a very unlikely couple. I would certainly say it's not a couple. I mean, a willingly downsized American guy and a Vietnamese activist, unwillingly downsized, and an amputee. I mean, funny?
It's a comedy.
All right. Just wanted to make sure. I mean, actually, obviously we have actors we know. I mean, Matt Damon, Kristen Wiig, Chris Waltz, Laura Dern, to name a few, which are really worldwide known actors. I mean, unlike Hong Cho, who plays Nguyen Lan Tran. So, what made you cast her as the perfect woman for such an unlikely love story? Why her?
Why her as opposed to a star?
Not only as opposed to a star, we're talking activist, Vietnamese, amputee, foul language.
Yeah, but that's all in the screenplay.
Of course.
And then we have to find the right actress. And the gods, the casting gods, sent me Hong Chow. Who is Hong Chow? Who steals the movie? She is Vietnamese. She was born in Thailand to Vietnamese refugee parents. They emigrated to America when she was a little girl. They went to the state of Louisiana. Why? There are many Vietnamese people there because there is the shrimp industry. And in Vietnam, there had been the shrimp industry, so they went to a place where there's the same industry. Her parents didn't catch shrimp. They had convenience stores, you know, stores where you can buy anything, cigarettes and food, gas. And she went to film school. She was the first person in her family ever to attend university. She likes movies. More than acting, she likes movies. And while in film school, she was acting in some of her comrades' films, and they noticed that she was good. Oh, no, I'm not. Yes, you are. Really? After university, she went to New York, took some acting classes, started finding work, and here she is. I had seen her previously only in Paul Thomas Anderson's Inherent Vice. She has a small but memorable part as a prostitute in that film. And then she was in some American TV series, which I have not seen, Treme and Big Little Lies. Did you see that?
Yeah.
What did you think?
You know, I think it was, yeah.
Okay.
No more than that.
Okay, yeah, all right.
That's my opinion, you
Yeah,
get it.
no, I
I mean, actually, you just said that she steals the movie, and I think she pretty much steals the movie. But there's another
absolutely.
actor.
Once, you know, she,
I mean-
yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead. It's your
No,
conversation.
Matt Damon, it's Matt Damon's movie, but once Hong Chow comes on screen, Matt who? You look at her.
And another one, I don't know if you agree, but that I think also steals the movie somehow, is Christoph Waltz.
Yes.
I mean, honestly, every time he's on screen, I don't know about you, I'm like, give me more, give me more. I mean,
My wife was here in the audience, and she saw it.
bonjour.
And,
Did she think he stole the movie too?
well, what I was gonna say is, she's nodding. When she saw early cuts of the film, she said, "Oh, people are going to love Christoph. If you have more moments or scenes with him, put them in."
Should always listen to your wife.
I know.
I'm telling you.
She agrees.
She agrees. Actually, it's interesting. In an interview I read that he gave, he said that he considered, I mean, his role, so to speak, as a mentor. Do you agree with that? Is that how you view Christoph Waltz's character?
He landed upon that idea because he's older than Matt Damon. Before meeting Christoph Waltz, I had met younger actors for that part. They may not have had that same point of, but look, an actor has to make a choice once cast. What's my point of view going to be? And Christoph decided upon being a mentor to this character. It's inherent in the screenplay, but then the actor makes a choice, I'm going to do this. And it seemed like a fine choice to me, so, you know, I don't care, fine, that's a nice dynamic. You know, once you cast specific actors, a specific actor, you want a specific choice for how that actor is going to appear in the film.
I also understand that when you write, you write with actors or actresses in mind, who are not necessarily the ones you ultimately cast, and sometimes there are actors or actresses from the past. For instance, I read about Schmidt, William Holden, Cesar Ruth, Giulietta Messina. Here, who did you have in mind when you were actually hearing your characters' voices building up?
For the Matt Damon character, I thought both of Paul Giamatti and Jack Lemmon. For the Christoph Waltz part, a Serbian friend of mine. For Naklan, I thought of Gong Li in some of her her work in the 80s with Zhang Yimou. Yeah, but not all the time, just sometimes. You know, when you're writing a film and you're trying to, if you're having some trouble, it helps to think of someone you know, or an actor, even for who might be dead. You know, how would that person do it? What might that person say?
In fact, you also said that you always aspire in a way to make a Ashby or Robert Altman movie. Didn't you say that Downsizing is maybe the closest you got to that, given the structure and the feel of it all?
Not really.
Or who inspired you here? What work, what film, what inspiration, really? You love my questions, I know.
This one was unusual because when we were writing the screenplay, it felt really new. There was really nothing we could compare it to it. I'm not saying that as a compliment to myself. I'm just telling you the fact. Like, I wish I could have thought of a movie. In terms of the structure, not to compare this film to those great films, but you and I talked about it earlier today. One director's work in whom I found some consolation because the screenplay was turning out so crazy and episodic was some early Fellini movies, The Knights of Cabiria, La Dolce Vita, 8½, where you follow one character through a series of often very different episodes. And the audience could wonder, why am I in this episode? And who are these new people I'm meeting and supposed to have a relationship with? And then comes a moment at the end where the character has some kind of revelation, and there's a close-up. And you have a sense of the entire accumulated experience of the film passing before the protagonist's eyes, and perhaps a narrative thread which until then had seemed loose is suddenly pulled tight. Again, not comparing this film to those great films, but I find inspiration in that. I get bored, and many film directors are bored by the necessity for a 3-act structure. Fellini teaches us, Scorsese teaches us that you don't have to think in terms of 3 acts. You could think in terms of sequences, different sequences.
It's called life. Really.
That's called life, right?
Of course, I'm sure you obviously discussed downsizing with your cast, either before the filming, during the filming. Maybe you shared some downsizing dreams or nightmares, I don't know. What is your, would you or any of them be okay with being the size of a chocolate bar, for instance? Or would you, like Kristen Wiig's character, chicken out?
What's your next question?
No, I want to know. You must have had these discussions.
I've been asked, let me be.
And we're not
let
being
me be
filmed, we're
frank.
not going to be on YouTube, we can say whatever we
I've been
want.
asked a lot, and I'm just starting the interviews, and that question, would you downsize? And I'm trying to, I have no idea, and I'm trying to think of a clever answer that I can, and I can't think of one. I don't know whether.
But would any of your actors, I don't know, when you were discussing, it's impossible that you didn't have discussions about that. Would any surprise you by telling you, hey?
We never had that discussion.
You never had that discussion. And I'm supposed to believe you.
Yeah.
Do we believe Alexander Payne? All right, but we'll let you be with it. Okay. Actually, it's true that your films, this is no exception, are emotionally twisted, funny as you said, and I was wondering what scene got the biggest grin out of you, intellectually, or, touched you most, either while you were filming or in the editing room?
This one?
Yes.
That's an easy one to answer.
I'm glad.
The one shot where Naklan says, yes, I'm going to Norway with you too. By the time I'm finished making a film, and this is true for any director, I've seen the film tens of thousands of times. I never need to see it again for the rest of my life. But that shot that captured that performance, and the camera is coming in close on her face, and she did it in take 1. That's a shot that every time I see it, I think, thank God we got that. If the whole rest of the film exists only to support that shot, it's okay by me.
Well,
But that's me. Maybe you might like something else, but I like that shot. It's so exciting when you get a good piece of performance.
when you feel it's just hitting the mark, right?
It reflects both the planning that went into the shot, the planning of the screenplay, casting of the actor, everything that was contemplated for so long. Yet in the moment that it happens, it's completely spontaneous. And you have the feeling that it's happening for the first time. That's what you want to do. I had dinner about a month ago in London with Ken Loach, the great Ken Loach. And he was talking about the excitement of cinema as opposed to theater is catching actors, or they could be non-actors, but seeing real human behavior, someone hearing something, responding to something, reacting for the first time, and it's interesting and it's complicated, and you can capture that forever. And he said that, you know, it's harder when you make a fiction film where you rehearsed and planned it. And it's easier if you have no rehearsal, or if you have non-actors, or you have actors who are encouraged to improvise the dialogue, and that's fine, and I respect Mr. Loach. But it's also possible in fiction film if you have a terrific actor, and if you're catching an early take, and if the director hasn't interfered too much. You know, you think, oh, the director has to really coach the actor. No, the director has to choose the right actor. The old cliche is the truest. 95% of directing is casting. And in this particular case, the gods sent me the right actor, this Hong Chow. That was take one. I didn't say a damn thing to her before that take. And she was and is bulletproof. Which is, I mean, I could never do that with the lights and the camera, deliver something not seemingly, but genuinely spontaneous, even though it's very rehearsed. Did I say too much?
Time for your questions. Any questions? The thing that obviously, in a way, I found interesting is that, like you, Paul never really left Omaha, Nebraska. You even shot in the school where you were going, you know, as a younger man. I mean, just the fact, I find it interesting that you still are in Omaha, Nebraska, and yet for the first time you chose a very international cast. I mean, was it that important for you to have both these roots, so to speak, and did it sort of feed your vision or something?
Yes. Yes.
I'm like, he agrees?
No, I agree. The film starts small and grows and grows and grows and grows and grows in scope. And for me personally, I mean, you said it. It was important to root it in something familiar to me, which was and to shoot in Omaha and to have him be someone I understand. I don't want all my films to do that, but there's a way in which this film is very related to my previous six features.
In a way, I mean, and this is just, and then I'll ask them again to see if they woke up. But when you said this film is very related, one of the things that I found in all your films as sort of subtle thread is that all your characters really, I mean, starting with Citizen Ruth, I mean, Downsizing in a way is also a film about physical or social death of sort, but always to have like a new, fresh start, which in this case Leisureland offers or not. Is that the way you also like to operate? I mean, how do you reinvent yourself every time as a filmmaker, as a writer? Do you need to go through this sort of mental death, physical death, to just have your characters move on, have fiction come into action?
Oh my God.
True.
What am I supposed to do with that question?
Well, I mean, isn't that true that all your characters are either about to die or die? We're talking Citizen Ruth, we're talking about Schmidt, we're talking about the Descendants. We have a lot of physical death that's or social death that suddenly trigger the plot. And I find it's exactly the same here.
About Schmidt, the Descendants, Nebraska, and this have that.
Thank you.
It's somehow awareness of the proximity to death, triggers some reflection, and then the reflection in turn triggers some action. How successful that action is, that's something else. Yeah. It's an old cliche, but it's true. If you know you're dying tomorrow, how differently would you behave? But the fact is, we're all dying tomorrow. It's just maybe tomorrow in a couple of years.
All right, shall we have questions
On
right
that cheery
now?
note,
Hello, good evening.
where are you? Hello.
Hello, thank you for your movie.
You're welcome.
And, thank you. And I'd like to know what is your idea of the concept of free will in this movie, and who is George? Thank you.
What's my concept of free will in the movie and what?
Who is George?
Who is George? I have no idea how to answer the question about free will,
Thank
so
you.
I'm going to say I have no idea to answer. And George was a brother of mine who died a couple of years ago. Thank you. Didn't get to see this film.
Question here.
Bonsoir, moi je vais la poser en français parce que j'ai trop de respect pour la poser en anglais. Est-ce que dans ce film, le plus difficile ça a été de rendre les humains petits, en tout cas donner l'impression que les humains étaient petits, ou donner l'impression que le monde était plus grand? Quel a été le plus difficile?
Well, in this movie, I mean, what did you find the toughest? I mean, you found that the toughest was to show how small man is or how big the world is?
It's an excellent question. I think what you're really asking is, why am I so handsome? And how is it that I'm 56 and my skin is so nice? Well, I use a moisturizer, and I wash my face every night before I go to sleep. No, I don't know how to answer. I don't know how to answer that question.
All right, well,
That's two unanswerable questions. Wow.
wow, we're breaking some record here. All right, who's brave enough to ask the next question?
No, but are you talking about in an intellectual way or in a physical, like visual effect way?
A technical way, visual effect.
The visual effects supervisor and the cinematographer and I had long discussions about big camera versus small camera. How do you shoot small people? Until the Matt Damon character miniaturizes, downsizes, we shoot all small people as though small people actually existed and we have only normal cameras. So in order to get a close-up on a small person, you have to use either a very long lens, which means the depth of field, the focus is very shallow, excuse me, or a macro lens, where you can get very close and it's very wide. The movie makes a transition in one shot. The shot where you see a number of they're Jamaican and Trinidadian nurses waiting for the small arrivals. You don't know that at first. Then you see the big nurse, and you realize, oh, now, along with Matt Damon, you're with the small people. That is also an optical transition, where we're pretending that small movie cameras now exist in the small world. And from then until the end of the film, big people, if we ever see them, or the big world, are shown from a small camera perspective. And I can't say one is easy, not to take your question too literally, that one what's harder, this or that. I'm just explaining the process and our technical discussions behind that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Question over there. Yeah, could you stand up there? Merci.
Hi. Well, thank you for being here. I have a question, and it's not about the size, but it's about something that happened. Sorry. It's about something that happened in the beginning of the movie when Matt Damon is talking with his mother, and she said that she's in a lot of pain, and he said something like everybody is suffering in many different ways. And I wanted to know if there were something you wanted to explain about this during the whole movie. Was it about the pain of the people, or am I totally wrong?
Thanks for asking about that. That's really a lovely moment for you to ask about, you know. For Jim, the co-writer, and me, we simply, I can't explain it exactly. It just felt right to write it. But for the character in particular, I think it's nice that he's aware of the pain of others. Even though the character seems very passive during the film, he doesn't often seem to have an inner engine which is driving him, which is in a way you could say a flaw in the screenplay, because generally we like protagonists who have more of a motive, you know, who has a goal and tries to achieve it and overcomes obstacles or doesn't during the course of the story. His goals are more silent and subtle. But we do know that he's aware of the pain of others and wants to help others. We see him helping his mother, we see him at work, we see him later catering to his wife. He gets lost in a world of materialism and consumerism for a while, and then this crazy Vietnamese woman takes him by the neck and helps him fall back into himself. Somehow that line of dialogue, it's not a theme statement of the film, but it hints at something that he's aware of. Thanks for mentioning it.
Question ici.
Merci pour ce film. Je tenais à vous dire que je suis vietnamien et je trouvais que le comportement du personnage vietnamien est vraiment crédible. Je veux savoir, a-t-il été conseillé par des Vietnamiens?
He considers that her behavior was true, but, and?
Did you get, did you get any advice from Vietnamese? Was she
Well, from
maybe
her,
coached? Or?
she did it herself. Vietnamese is her first language. And she's been saying now that in a way her performance, she is paying, to give the homage to her parents. And in a way, she's respecting the rhythm and the comedy and the pathos of the dialogue as written, but also paying a tribute to her parents who speak kind of like that. Est-ce que vous comprenez?
Question, oui, là-bas.
Bonsoir. Alors, le film parle beaucoup d'écologie et le fait que le downsizing soit fait justement pour sauver l'espèce humaine. On voit à la fin que finalement c'est un peu plus compliqué que ça. Est-ce que vous vouliez que le film soit pessimiste à ce sujet ou alors qu'il y ait malgré tout une lueur d'espoir sur ce sujet qui nous concerne tous aujourd'hui de manière très urgente? Merci.
Well, obviously, environment is very much at the heart of the movie. Are you, considering what's happening now, an optimist despite it all, or a pessimist, and considering that the urgency is right here, right now?
I think it's not about being an optimist or a pessimist, it's about being a realist. Like what's really happening, and what the newspapers are telling us every day is that we're in a lot of trouble, and it may be too late. And maybe we have between, 200 and 800 years left, something like this. Who knows? But in almost all ways, the world is spinning in the wrong direction right now.
Actually, do you believe that the characters are downsizing to really save the planet, or is it to save the budget? In a way. You never really which is interesting. You never guide your audience into going
What
one
do you
or the
mean
other.
By to save the budget, you mean
I
to
mean,
save...
to basically have a greater budget and
Oh
live
yeah,
well.
absolutely. Well, that's the genius of the idea as presented. You know, in Duchamp's, Christoph Waltz says it. Altruism seeks egotism. The only way you can get people to do the right thing is somehow to appeal to their self-interest.
Question là-bas.
Hello. Thank you for being there. I was wondering, since humans destroy Earth, and regarding the end of your movie, do you think saving human species is important?
That's a fair question.
Yeah. The question that your movie is asking.
I mean, well, yeah. Asbjornsen, the scientist, says it. He says man is too beautiful, not always, it can be. Man is too beautiful and too improbable a form of life to be allowed to kill himself, to be allowed to disappear forever from the cosmos. We know we're not alone. Who knows what else is out there? We'll probably never know. Things are too far away.
Quite a few billions of,
Yeah.
quite a few lifetimes. Question. Yes? No?
I think elephants are worth saving, and we're losing them.
Well, and you just saw what Trump allowed and then backed off. What
What an asshole.
Thank you! Thank
What an
you.
asshole.
How can you allow back in America elephant trunks? Anyway, yeah, terrible, terrible. You know, I mean, so I don't know, sort of maybe cheeky question or not. I mean, I know you know Paris well. You filmed Paris Je t'aime, the 14th arrondissement, and you chose a very international cast. Now, excuse me, but why didn't you include some of our iconic actors or actresses? Why didn't you want to downsize Depardieu or Deneuve? I was really wondering. I felt very frustrated about that.
Might be a little hard to downside dip on. Sorry.
Still.
Why not a French actor?
Yeah, I was wondering because your cast is truly international.
Yeah, I'd like very much to work with Marion Cotillard someday. I think she's a great star. Not everyone agrees with me.
Yeah.
Not everyone agrees. I understand that, but at her best, you know, everyone has his own taste. Big people's. I like her.
All right. One more, of course, question here.
Sorry.
I couldn't resist asking you.
Je vais demander en français. Vous venez de parler de Marion Cotillard, je crois qu'elle est très impliquée dans l'écologie et la défense de l'environnement, etc. Je voulais savoir à quel point vous êtes militant dans ce domaine-là, parce que vous avez parlé, vous dites que votre film était une comédie, mais c'est quand même beaucoup plus que ça, et vous traitez de thèmes très très forts et sérieux. Je voulais savoir à quel point voilà, vous êtes militant et engagé sur ces sujets-là.
Yeah, I'm not. Of course, I feel strongly, but the environmental aspect of the film was really a point of entry. We had the idea, if people could be this small, what could we do with this idea? And then I thought, well, how would that really come to pass in reality? Probably crazy, but very sane Scandinavian scientists would dream of that as a panacea to overpopulation and climate change. And then, of course, this is, of all the issues we have on Earth, that, of course, is the number one. That and nuclear arms, those are the big, but really the climate, that's everyone and everything. And it's maybe too late. So I wouldn't, not to take your question too literally, I'm not militant, but of course it's nice to add something to the correct side of our process as a species, as we're thinking about that. But the film has that in many. Look, what's terrible is that the idea of climate change has become politicized. And that you're from one political group or the other who believes it or not. That's just the stupidest fucking thing I've ever heard of. That's so stupid. So I'm sorry, but the film has other, let's say, political elements on its mind as well. You know, and it's not a fierce, militant political film. We make comedies. But at least the film shows an awareness of, and acknowledges, and, you know, look at this, look at this, look at this, in a gentle way. It's a gentle comedy.
Well, this concludes our discussion. Unless
Anything
there's
else,
something.
Scott, you
Why not? Well, maybe we could know if it's already in your mind. About 11 years about Schmidt, about 10 years for Downsizing. Is there something in your mind brewing as we speak that will be ours to see in a few years?
Oh, God.
Yes?
No, I don't know what my next film is, but one day I'd sure like to make a Western.
All right. Yeah, Alexander, thank you very much for coming. It's real.